Alright, class, this is going to hopefully be the last segment of the videos for Gilded Age politics, or at least on the rise of the Populist Party. In this segment, we are going to focus on the Depression of 1893 and some of the political action that comes as a result of it. We'll look at people on the march with Coxey and his march with the jobless. We will throw in there the 1894 Pullman strike and what it was about, and Grover Cleveland's actions towards it, and how does that affect his popularity in the Democratic Party. Then we will focus our attention on one of the turning point elections in American history, the election of 1896, which pins William Jennings Bryan versus William McKinley, and is seen as the American American politics entering its fourth political system in its history. So let's get started with Depression politics. So Grover Cleveland wins his second term as president in 1892. He's going to be the first and only president to win non-consecutive terms to the White House. Unfortunately for Grover Cleveland, no sooner did he take office than the country entered one of its worst and longest depressions. This is known as the Panic of 1893. And what happened is that in the spring and summer of 1893, the stock market crashed. The stock market crashed as a result of over-speculation, and speculation is when the prices the prices of the stock they are unrealistically high, and they're kind of they're bloated, and there's really no substance behind these stock prices. And so the stock market has a big boom and it crashes in 1893 as a result of this over speculation. And as a result of this stock market crash, dozens of railroads went into bankruptcy. And this is going to launch a depression that's going to last almost 4 years in America. Farm foreclosures reach new heights. Unemployment reaches about 20% of the workforce. People are ending up relying on soup kitchens, riding the rails as hobos, things that we'll see again happening in 1929. President Cleveland, he's more conservative than he was in the 1880s. He dealt with the crisis by championing the gold standard and otherwise adopted like a laissez-faire, hands-off policy towards the economy. And his leaning towards the gold standard is also going to be coupled with the decline in silver prices. And this is going to encourage investors and the president to trade silver dollars for gold dollars. As a result, the gold reserve, these are bars of gold stored by the U.S. Treasury, it fell to a dangerously low level. And President Cleveland saw really no alternative but to do two things here. One, he's going to repeal the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act increased the coinage of silver, but it wasn't in the amount to satisfy farmers and miners. If you recall, farmers and miners wanted silver to be coined for every 16 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, and it wasn't quite there. Really around the time period of 1893 and 1896, you're looking at the market as 32 ounces of silver per 1 ounce of gold. But anyway, this action did not stop the drain on the gold reserves. So then the president has to turn to Wall Street, and he turns to banker J.P. Morgan and borrows $65 million in gold to support the dollar and the gold standard. This is going to have a negative effect on Cleveland's popularity with the American public and within his own party, because now this deal is going to convince many Americans that the government in Washington was only a tool of the rich Eastern bankers. Workers of the Democratic Party and workers as a whole are going to become further disenchanted with Cleveland when he took some actions dealing with the Pullman strike of 1894. The Pullman strike of 1894 dealt with the Pullman Rail Company raising rates as far as as far as rent goes. With these company houses that the Pullman Company has supplied to its workers. workers. They raised the rent without raising the pay. And so the American Railway Union, led by a man named Eugene Debs, they're going to go on strike to protest, this rise in the cost of living, and not giving the workers a rise in pay as well. And what Cleveland does is that he used what's called court injunctions. An injunction is when you have a court order to stop the strike. And he justifies using the court injunction, and he justifies using federal troops to put down this strike because he says that the strike is getting or interfering with the delivery of the U.S. mail. And since the U.S. mail cannot be delivered, and that is an arm of the federal government, therefore Cleveland is justified in using court measures and troops to put down the strike. The strike will be put down, and Eugene Debs will actually be jailed for about 6 months as a result of violating this court order. We'll talk about Eugene Debs again in the 20th century. It's during this time in jail that he's going to turn towards being a socialist, and we'll see him again in the early part of the 1900s. As the Depression worsened, you see more and more action taken by the American public. Joblessness grew, unemployment grew, and you started to see the rumblings of a potential class war between capital or management and labor. People were especially alarmed by the joblessness on the march, or in 1894 was called Coxey's Army. It was a march to Washington by thousands of unemployed people, led by a populist named Jacob Coxey of Ohio. This army, and I use army in quotations, this army demanded that the federal government spend about $500 million in a public works program to create jobs. Once again, this is something that we'll see FDR and the New Deal put into action to combat the Great Depression in the 1930s. So Coxey and the Populists, just a little bit before their time. Unfortunately, that this protest or this march will be put down, or will pretty much fall apart when Coxey and other protest leaders are arrested for trespassing, and the dejected quote-unquote army is going to leave home. In the next in the next segment, what we want to look at, if I can get my camera right, is we want to look at the election of 1896. Dealing with William Jennings Bryan and the Populists versus William McKinley and the Republicans. So the election of 1896, one of the major turning points in our political history, and it represents national politics being in a transition. The repeal of the Civil Purchase Act, Cleveland's handling of the Depression, thoroughly discredited the conservative leadership of the Democratic Party. At the same time, the Democrats were buried in congressional elections of 1894 by the Republicans. And so the Democrats are scrambling here between 1894 and 1896 to, get a heartbeat, get some sort of life back into their party. They look, and at the same time they're losing support, the Populists, are gaining both votes and legislative seats. And this is going to set the stage for a major reshaping of party politics in 1896. And so let's look at the election of 1896. We want to look at William Jennings Bryan, the Democrats, and the Populist Party. I had we discussed previously that by 1896 the Democrats were divided. They're divided between the more conservative element of their party. These would be the people that would support the gold standard. These are the people that were loyal to Cleveland, and they're going to be divided between the pro-silver Democrats. And the pro-silver Democrats are looking for a leader. And so when the Democratic Party comes to their national convention in Chicago in the summer of 1896, the pro-silver forces are going to dominate this convention. They overwhelmingly vote not to support the current administration of Grover Cleveland. And so who's going to be nominated for the Democratic ticket? William Jennings Bryan, a young man of about 36 during this time period. He's going to be nominated because he captures the hearts of the delegates with his speech. It's known as the Cross of Gold speech. So William Jennings Bryan is going to be nominated, and at this convention hall, the hall is called to order, so a hush falls over the crowd. And William Jennings Bryan has his voice, not like mine today, but he has his voice that booms and it reaches every single corner of this hall. And in this Cross of Gold speech, as he's driving home the point of being, having an unlimited coinage of silver and coining silver 16 ounces to 1 ounce of gold, the 16:1 ratio of the 1870s. As he's ending his speech and he's driving home the point, it climaxes with this phrase, we will answer their demands for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon this cross of gold. And at that moment, when he says those last lines of the speech, the entire convention hall erupts and cheers. And this is going to make William Jennings Bryan a superstar pretty much overnight, and he's going to become the Democratic nominee. So if you look here, the William Jennings Bryan, the Democrats have pretty much just, if I use this term, use it liberally, just hijacked the main issue of the Populist Party, that issue of the free unlimited coinage of silver at the ratio of 16 ounces to 1 ounce of gold. So they took the leading issue of the Populist Party. So the Populist Party, for the most part, they have no choice but to support the Democrats and fuse together with the Democratic Party. You do see both some of the conservative Democrats, holding tight to their own issues, and they want to select their own candidate. You have some of the populists, refusing to align themselves with the Democrats. But for the most part, we can say here for the election of 1896 that the Democratic Party and the Populist Party are going to be fused together. So what about William McKinley, Mark Hanna, and the Republicans? For their presidential nominee, the Republicans nominated William McKinley of Ohio. He's best known for a high protective tariff, the McKinley tariff, which we'll talk about when we talk about Hawaii. He's also considered a friend of labor, and embarrassing enough, he has a voting record that is going to be more friendly to silver than it is to gold. However, Mark Hanna, who's going to become the chairman of the Republican Party, who has made his fortune in business, was a financial power behind McKinley's campaign, the financial power behind McKinley's nomination, for that matter. And he's going to turn this campaign, around, where it's going to make McKinley, the supporter of the gold standard, and they're going to blame the Democrats for the Panic of 1893. And you're also going to see, millions of dollars being poured into this campaign, about $16 million by the Republicans compared to $1 million by the Democrats. There's that 16-to-1 ratio again. But $16 million will be poured into the campaign for the Republicans as to educate the American public about what would happen if William Jennings Bryan and this bimetallism platform would be successful and win the White House. You also see employers telling their workers not to show up to work on Wednesday, the day after the election, if William Jennings Bryan wins. And so you see some scare tactics, some propaganda, and definitely money being influential in the outcome of this election. So the campaign, I've discussed a little bit about it. What about the candidates themselves? What are they doing? William McKinley lets Mark Hanna do most of the job for him. In fact, he's going to sit on his front porch and run a front porch campaign, greeting supporters at his house in Ohio. William Jennings Bryan is going to travel over 18,000 miles. And he's going to give over more than 600 speeches. 36 in one day is going to be the high watermark for his number of speeches. And he's going to visit around 27 states. However, in the last weeks of the campaigns, even though Biden's doing everything he can to win the White House, he's going to be hurt by a couple factors here. Number one, there's going to be a rise in wheat prices, which make farmers less desperate. Number two, I talked to you about employers telling their workers that the factories were shut down and not to bother showing up to work if Bryan was elected. And so on Election Day, McKinley is going to carry all of the Northeast, the upper Midwest, and is going to have a decisive victory over Bryan. He's going to win by about 600,000 votes in the popular vote, and he's going to win 271 to 176 in the electoral votes. So what's the significance of this election of 1896 and William McKinley winning the White House? So the election of 1896 had both short-term and long-term consequences on American politics. For one thing, it marked the end of the stalemate and stagnation that characterized politics of the Gilded Age. For another, the defeat of Bryan, the populist free silver movement, initiated an era of Republican dominance of the presidency. 7 of the next 9 elections, and both houses of Congress, 17 of the next 20 sessions are going to be dominated by Republicans. Once the party of free soil, free labor, and free men, the Republicans have now started to shift over to being the party of business, industry, and a strong national government. The Democrats are going to carry on in defeat as that sectional party of the South, that solid South, and they're going to host whatever populist sentiments remain. Some other things that are significant as a result of this election. It is going to spell the decline of the Populist Party. Soon after 1896, the Populists will cease to be a national party. In the South, populist leaders gave up trying to unite poor whites and blacks, discovering that racism was stronger than common economic interests. And then, ironically enough, the populist reform agenda, things that were championed in 1892 and in 96, are going to be taken up by the Republicans and the Democrats in the reform, in the reform era of the progressive movement, 1900 to 1917. The other significance of the 1896 election, it was a clear victory for big business, cities, conservative economics with a gold standard, and moderate middle class values. This was like the last hope of rural America to reclaim its former dominance in American politics. No longer are election victories going to be won on the farm, but they're going to be won in the cities. And the last thing that's significant about the 1896 election is that William McKinley, who wins, is going to emerge as the first modern president, an active leader who takes the United States as being a relatively isolated country to becoming a major player in international affairs. And then Mark Hanna and his campaign tactics, all right, created a model for organizing and financing a successful campaign, which focuses now on winning favorable publicity in the mass media, the newspapers, the telegraphs, and so on and so forth. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I apologize that it was a little bit longer than the others, but we are now done with the rise of the Populist Party. Stay tuned for my last videos on the growth of cities and American culture.